Hello, and welcome back to this Trails into Reverie Let's Play with me, SLJRPG. In the last episode we defeated the 0th child in the final countdown, or like a version of her in this world, but it allowed us to return, and we got a white sealing stone which is contained beyond the Reverie, which we're going to view today. Don't know what this will be. These are but minute fragments of memories drifting in an endless ocean. Memories of what will be in the near future. Calvert stuff. Could they be shadows of the tangled threads woven by Elysium? Or perhaps faded illusions that slip through the cracks of time and space? There are none who know the answer. Interesting. There's different versions. Okay. Another Hot Strings Paradise. January, year 1208 of the Septian calendar. Between the two great mountains at the tip of the Calvardian basis sits Longley. The town is known for two things, being the eastern entrance to the Republic and its exceptional hot springs. Through these enticing factors, does it continue to welcome tourists hailing from both home and abroad. Yet today it served guests quite unlike its many unseasoned visitors. These have come from another renowned hot springs paradise situated in the northern reaches of Erebonia. The Sporzers. Is it going to just all be stories? The depth of flavour in the food here is just exquisite. Agreed, the Phoenix Wings food certainly is nothing to sneeze at, but I have my doubts that the chef could replicate dishes this unique in taste. The Michelin Inn's reputation continues to precede itself. Baron Tio and Lady Lucius also were sampling the inn's culinary delights. The spirits high and the stomachs filling fast. Their daughter Elise sat next to them, her spirit a bit lower by comparison, as her brows furrowed with concern. Sure, its luxuries come with just an equally luxurious price tag, and there's 4 of us, so even 2 nights must have cost a small fortune. Upon realizing what she said, she shook her head. I didn't mean to dampen the mood, I just know we have the money, but all my budgeting as a student council president has made a terrible habit of me seeing numbers in everything. Her older brother Ian couldn't help but let out a chuckle. Then the budget buster in you will likely know how much we saved, because we're not here as paying customers. We're invited by the owners personally. They said they wanted to get to know us since we run similar establishments. So here we are, and we'll be inviting them to your mirrors sooner or later. Of course. Right, Dad? Absolutely. And add this to the list of boons coming from our countries finally coming to terms with one another. The Republic is reveling in unheard levels of prosperity, and the relations between our people are more active and festive than ever. I, for one, welcome any opportunity to further foster friendship. The Baron took another healthy sip of his Beiju before continuing. Friendship over fighting, I say. Such a shame that the world tends to overcomplicate that simple concept. Seeing her husband's glass almost empty, Lucia filled it to the brim, while adding in her own thoughts. That's all the more reason why we need to make the most of this invitation and enjoy ourselves to the fullest. The children nodded in agreement. And even that set aside, there's no reason to spoil our family vacation when we so rarely have time to take them. Oh, I've been reading about some unusual sweets we're trying. Would you like to share some with me, Reed? In a bit. I'm thinking of taking another soak in the hot springs, so I might be in the mood for something sweet after. The food here is delicious, but as far as I'm concerned, the hot springs are the real star of the show. That's my boy right there. The ruling lord of the Hot Springs Paradise would never let a good discussion about them pass by. He was fond of their quality and soothing effects as Reen, enthusiasm undeniably apparent from the warmth of his tone to the width of his smile. Their medicinal springs happen to be my favorite of mine. Can't help but be fascinated by them time and time again. I can believe it. I've always known about them, but here's the first place I've been able to feel the way they warm you right to your core. Think we should make one available at the Phoenix Wings? I think it'd be worth a try, but it comes with its own obstacles. For as many problems as Tio expressed in practical terms, Reen held just as many proposed solutions. The conversation grew more involved by the minute, leaving the ladies of the house to pleasurably bask in their glow and continue enjoying the meal before them. All four felt the same, that it had been too long since they could enjoy each other's company, but the wait had been well worth it. That night, after indulging in some post-dinner soak in the springs, and telling his family that he was going for a walk, Reen departed the inn. "Alright, let's do this." He took a deep breath, the crisp night air of Longley filling his lungs. The hot springs were excellent bonus to his trip, to be sure, but that was not the real reason he had agreed to visit. He had come in search of young Kafai, the famed sword hermit. Master Kafai was the founder of the 8 Leaves One Blade School, of which Reen was a practitioner, and though now over 70 years old, he was still regarded as one of the strongest combatants on the continent. They had not met since Reen's enrollment at Thor's. Many a letter was exchanged during the 4 years that followed, but even they had stopped after Reen had earned the right to call himself a divine blade over a year ago. There was so very much he wished to discuss with his master. What he had learned in his 4 years of training, what had transpired since becoming a divine blade, the true meaning behind the final blade to master the 8 leaves. There's plenty I'd like to ask that'll have nothing to do with swordsmanship too. All these questions, all impossible to answer, without first knowing the whereabouts of a single individual. Even a senior practitioner like Cassius Bryce claimed ignorance, having received not a single update from their old master. He'd always been an elusive but traceable sort, but wherever he was now, he was next to impossible to track. That was until word of the Blade Master being sighted in Longley reached Reen's ears. The man held his fondness for the town's specialities, those being the hot springs and its fragrant tea leaves, making the sighting worthy of a particular note. He also knew that from the letters before they stopped that he intended to journey eastward, making Longley one of the more plausible stopping points. The word came from him just as the Sporgers were invited to stay at the inn during the New Year vacation. Reen's instincts told him that the timing was a little too fortunate, but how vague the lead was, even it would most likely result in him leaving the same as he had arrived. While he had not discussed the rumour being key to his travelling here, his family seemed to sense it was more than a simple pleasure trip for him. I know Dad would have a great time catching up with him, but I don't want to get his hopes up for nothing. These thoughts in mind, Reen made his way through the night streets. Longley's architecture was distinctly Eastern, making it a uniquely intriguing sight amongst most of Calvert's towns and cities. This was not to say it was similar to Crossbell's East Street. With subtle colours paired with dignified beauty, every wall and stone exuded the traditional concepts of wabi-sabi. One look was enough to understand the region was rich with history. Apologies if I'm butchering stuff. This quiet charm would give way to contrastly lively evenings, where tourists both westward and farther eastward would be greeted to stalls dedicated to the hot springs and more. This too held a traditional sort of charm. Reen asked several merchants if they had any information pertaining to the whereabouts of his master, somewhat sheepishly purchasing a number of souvenirs from their stores to keep himself from being a nuisance. They, he justified, would make an excellent guest for his friends, his co-workers and his students. I can't believe it's almost time for them to graduate. I might be more emotional about theirs than I was for mine. For the first time, Reen would get to experience what it was like for the young birds he had taken under his wing for 2 years to finally leave the nest. The first year had been eventful, to say the least. What had started as a problem class full of disagreements and mounting tension had slowly grown into one of compassion and understanding for one another. It was with each new discovery about themselves and every new ordeal the world sought to impose upon them that they grew not only as individuals, but as a team. He hoped this period would remain as much a meaningful part of their lives as it would always be for him. The months before the retributive tower's appearance held many a trial, making 10 months that followed in his shadow pass all too quickly. In that time, Reen's students continued to mature, building on everything they had accomplished in their first year to prepare for and settle into their desired future. Indeed, whether it was by overcoming their demons or by learning to work with them in a healthier fashion, the paths up until now had been well worn, and while they may have had to rest from time to time, he was proud to be a part of why their steps continued to face forward. Proud, but also lonely at the thought of saying goodbye. As their second year drew close, lacking in grandiose events, but still rewarding in its own right, it was a mixture of emotions that brought conflict within him the most. Can't believe I'm gonna go through it all over again next year, and even a year after that. The hell of a career path I chose to pursue, huh? He didn't know when he stopped walking. Realizing this, he resumed his search, paying respect in mind to the many generations of educators who came before him. No matter where he looked, he could not find Master Gafai in Longlai. It was, however, still too early to say whether the trip had been in vain. He had at least caught an unverified report of a Blade Master being seen in the mountains to the south. Wandering such terrain at night wasn't going to be ideal, but Reen was already firm on spending the next day with his family. Tonight it would have to be. Making a brief stop to the inn to tuck his souvenirs away somewhere secure, he then departed for his new destination. The mountain's winding, half-beating trails would not be more treacherous at night, but they were not off limits as such. The key Reen knew would not to be rely on sight alone. His sense of hearing and smell, perhaps even touch, were going to be equally vital in the hours ahead. Calling upon his experienced intellect to heighten all 5 senses, he took in his surroundings in full. This really takes me back to training in the mountains. To call the experience training would imply his time being one of the simple tutelage between student and master, but it equated to so much more. The danger was far worse than it was now, but the days requiring him to set foot in highly dangerous territories, just to find a day's food to survive. Sounds like the Kulan Mountains have been used for a similar exercise a long time ago. Reen was certain to think on the information gained during his search as he continued along with the trail. Searching for evidence of human activity in an environment like this was not a difficult task. Humans always leave behind something indicative of their presence, behind that no wild creature could, be it a long-dead fire, footprints, or traces of going on the hunt. One only needed to follow the like to lead to their source. Reen did so, advancing in caution instilled in him by both his master and hunting enthusiast of a father. They soon led him precisely to clear evidence a human had been in the area, though the evidence itself was far from what he expected. Remains of a camp. No, it didn't look like it had been left by a martial artist in training, or by roaming hunters. But the most peculiar thing was that there was multiple sites like the first, all evenly spaced from one to the next, as though something was being measured. Maybe this is from a group of scholars during field research, but it seems too large in scale for that. There was nothing more to be found here. Reen advanced. Soon after he found another unusual mound of evidence. It's like someone forced their way through here in a car, or like hacked open a path wide enough for a car to pass through. All further inspection here suggested whoever was responsible had given up on this endeavor, leading him to wonder if they somehow found success elsewhere. And if they did, why had they done this at all? The question pestered him. If there was anywhere to clear wide paths, the remote depths of the mountains certainly were not it, but instinct told him that he was only one step away from discovering the answer. If I keep on following the trail a little further... At this thought, Reen sensed someone approaching. One person, 2 people. Yes, there were 2, and it was clear they were aware of his presence as well. Only for a fleeting second did he think they might be the ones responsible for the strange trails, but the deadly tension that now thickened the air told him they were no simple scholars. He felt them draw near, the night veiling themselves well, but then he felt them stop. "How about you show yourselves?" He spoke without placing his hand on his tachi, signifying to those watching he had no desire to fight. Their silhouettes silently emerged from the darkest shadows of the mountains. They looked very much like the shinobi of the east he had heard about, their forms clad from top to bottom in black garments, and their faces fully obscured. "I see your inside poses a great threat after all, Divine Blade of the Empire. The contract with our client is yet to begin, but we will make an exception for one among their list of dangerous persons." The silhouettes then charged. They sought him completely off guard, drawing short blades to attack him as they narrowed in. Green's eyes widened in surprise, but nearly in the same moment he was in a fighting stance, hand over his still sheathed tachi. Fifth form, Morning Moon. He perceived the direction of the foe's attacks to evade them, then mounted a counter-attack of his own. All it took was an instant to repel their assault and leave them vulnerable. Ordinarily this would be the time to take offense, but all Reen could do was stare at the two with disbelief. "The thought entered my mind as soon as I saw you move, but now we've crossed blades." He paused in disbelief in his eyes, giving way to a more intent gaze. "Are you practitioners of the Eight Leaves School?" Another pause, this time from the silhouettes before answering as though they were well aware of the question was coming. "No, though we do possess ties to the school. We are the Ikaruga, practitioners of the Black God One Blade School." "The what?" Reen was left stunned. The two Ikaruga held their blades horizontally, ready to thrust them forward at any moment. It was as though they wanted to make it clear that while they had been caught off guard once, he would not be so fortunate twice. Reen responded by assuming the stance of his tachi, but these sides were only a beat away from engaging in battle. Savrixia, what could only be described as a black cyclone, roared from the darkness at speed that it seemed certain to slice anything it touched. Its appearance caught Reen by surprise more than the initial attacks by the silhouettes. He had not suspected an attack from that angle, that distance, or even that moment. His enemies, on the other hand, did not so much as flinch at the sight. The approaching blade, over an arc and a half in length, was heading directly for Reen's back. He couldn't possibly dodge it now. Perhaps he should have noticed. Perhaps it was impossible to notice. Whatever the answer, the Divine Blade of the Empire should soon fall. The silhouettes waited in his final moments to be, convinced of no other fate than the fate in his future. When Reen spun his body in full circle, applying the intensity built into his tachi from the motion to swing, the blow made was weighted yet precise, shifting the incoming blade to a new direction without mitigating its near overwhelming force. His technique was the application of the first form, Helix. There was no greater course in the moment than to use it to redirect the attack, without it ever making direct contact. The spinning blade was now significantly off its intended course, but Reen slashed at it again, birthing a shockwave that further shifted its path. The blade went flying hairs to the right of the direction it had come from. A hand was there to deftly catch it mid-air. "You may only recently be taken the title, but you are worthy of being a Divine Blade all the same. You use the unclouded eye well." From this hand emerged a new figure from the darkness. While he was clad in similar garments to silhouettes, something about his presence was much more inspired by comparison. His musculature was thoroughly discernible beneath his body, covered as a fortified suit. His every movement, however slight, reflected a complete lack of hesitation, and the faint light of his eyes, visible through his mask, projected no emotion whatsoever. The man possessed an aura of a true warrior, one projected only by those who have fought more battles than was possible to count. "Fall back. He's too formidable a foe for you to handle." The silhouette slid into the darkness in an instant. Only the new arrival was left to face Reen. I need to know, who are you, and why did you attack me? Our contract forbids the disclosure of such information. You will leave this place now, fledgling Divine Blade. The tone was not one of advice, nor one of an order. It was as if the man was stating a fact, his calmness veiling an undertone of malice that told Reen what would happen if he did not do as he was told. I'm afraid I can't do that without an explanation. Not when I haven't found what I'm looking for yet. I understand, then. There was no longer anything to discuss. All they could do was battle. I, Kurogane of the Rugun Tutsu School, shall be your opponent. Kurogane stood at attention. The large blade he had thrown before now pointed. I'd rather settle this with words, but I can see that's not an option. Reen sighed, taking his own stance in turn. Then Reen Swarzer, master of the 8 Lays 1 Bleed Skull 7th form, shall be yours. The Divine Blade moved instantly. The bizarre weapon the Kurogane wielded was less akin to a sword, and more 4 equally sized blades arranged in the shape of a cross, their bases connecting at a single point. Though he could direct his large weighted shuriken as though it was a simple child's toy, spoke volumes about how strong he was. Still, even if it was not infallible, for it was one to be ideally used in close-range combat, Kurogane appeared to have no other key weapons on hand, either meaning that if Reen could force him to fight where he would be at his most disadvantageous, he would very likely come out of this the victor. That was what he had in mind when he chose to act first. Second form, Gale. He closed the gap between them, drew his blade and made a wide swing towards his opponent in the blink of an eye. Kurogane blocked the blow with ease. That, however, meant nothing in the larger scheme of things. Reen knew well this man's capabilities. So long as the gap between them was closed, it was, he considered, the attack a success. But just as he thought he would be able to push onwards and overpower his foe by mounting a newly fierce assault, Kurogane had split his cross-shaped shuriken in half. The ease at which he did it made it clear this was intended by design. He's got crow-style blades. He can dual-wield sabers? There was no hiding his shock. In the West, double sabers were seen as relics from the Dark Ages, who were difficult to utilize. Crow was the only person we knew who was competent with one, and only one. The skill it would take to use two was almost too difficult to fathom. His surprise created an opening that Kurogane was not going to let pass unexploited. Possessing two twin-ended blades allowed the shinobi to perform considerably more strikes than Reen, giving him no chance to push back. Steel sparked as their weapons clashed. Kurogane was dominant for some time, but he could do nothing to bolster his advantage. With strike and spark after strike and spark, the advantage was moving back towards Reen. It was in part due to him being used to fighting this weapon that defied rationale. It was also because he had been given the time to find what he was looking for. A perfect range in which to attack. Double sabers were forged with a shorter reach than they appeared to have, something inevitable due to the handle being in the middle. It could be that because it was also used to form them as a shuriken, but the length of Kurogane's sabers were even shorter than Crow's, meaning Reen would have to adjust with the longer length of his blade. He measured patiently, staying only just out of Kurogane's reach, and evading the onslaught by a hair's breadth each time prior to countering. It was calculated critically thanks to Kurogane's frequent, rapid attacks, meaning all Reen had to do now was to wait for the right moment. This moment would come in the form of his opponent showing impatience for this stalled battle, driving him to take an unneeded step forward. Reen evaded the strike expertly, instantly returning it with an upward diagonal slash. The forceful swing of his Itachi made contact with the hand of Kurogane's only swung weapon, knocking it clean out of his hand. Reen dashed forward to make use of his availed opportunity, but only a flicker of bewilderment. Kurogane moved to deny him. He blocked Reen's attack with a double saber still in his possession, then hurled a hidden kunai with his free hand, jumping backwards a significant distance while doing so. Very good, Divine Blade of the Eight Leaves. You may pale to the skills of our princess, but you without doubt deserve your own reputation. Princess? Reen's invitation went unanswered as Kurogane took a notably different stance than before. Shall demonstrate my respect for your skill with my finest technique. This put Reen staunchly on guard. Senses heightened, he focused every nerve of his body, fixing his eyes on whatever was to come of Kurogane, who now was gone. Nothing remained where Reen's opponent had just stood. He hadn't taken his eyes off him, never eased himself for a moment, yet Kurogane was nowhere to be seen. How? Had he moved that quickly? Was it some kind of spatial translocation? But there were no signs to indicate either one. Was it that he never moved at all, or was he still there, sight unseen? No, that wasn't it either. The double saber Reen had repelled to the ground was also gone. I can sense him, he hasn't gone far. Reen suppressed the attack, the panic welling up within him, ending his senses for a second time. There was another black cyclone swirl towards him from the shadows. He half expected something of this nature, so a little deviation was able to deflect it as if he had the first time. The attack indicated Kurogane had reassembled his shuriken after recovering its lost half so he could throw it again. It also indicated, together with the slight changes in his surroundings, where he was now positioned. Reen had little more time to know where he was for certain, but ahead of making a solid conclusion, the cyclone came to him yet again from a new angle. That was fast. Though he had blocked the attack as well as the last, before he could fully correct his posture, the next cyclone approached. The gap between was getting shorter and shorter. Another. This time was shorter. Another. Shorter. Soon these assorted smaller cyclones were seemingly growing into a blended grand storm of death, with Reen trapped at its center. This doesn't feel like him being attacked by a single person. Did he make phantom copies of himself? He had no idea where the next cyclone cap would form. By the time he located it, the next one was ready. Even the unclouded eye wasn't going to be enough to introduce Kurogane's location. He'd been able to repel every blade that met with him so far, but that was growing increasingly difficult. I didn't want to use it, but I'm not sure I have a choice. Well aware of doing so would place him in danger, Reen took his mind off the battle. He gave up blocking and evading attacks, dedicated the bare minimum of his focus to not sustaining lethal blows, focusing his mind inward. He focused the power that he had long cultivated inside of him, the power he had feared, loathed, and rejected. The power he now relied on, desired, and nearly surrendered himself to. The power he faced with his loved ones at his side, making it a true part of himself. With his mind clear as day, he unleashed his full strength. Enlightened spirit unification. He imbued his Tachi with the great power surging out of him, crying out as he did so, spinning his body forcibly around to create a bladed circle around him. The energy released by his Tachi repelled all forthcoming shuriken with ease, and with them, Kurogane's phantom copies lurking in the darkness faded to nothing. With that, there you are. He charged towards Kurogane. The man was totally overwhelmed by Reen's sudden counterattack, throwing him off completely off balance. There was nothing he could do to repel what would come next. It's time to settle this. Reen swung his Tachi downward while pouring all of his might into a final single strike. But just as the two felt the battle was coming to an end, Zero form, duality. Accompanied with a voice as beautiful as a bell, was a slash tearing through the sky, its color so black it threatened to eclipse the moon. It effortlessly stopped Reen's weapon from reaching its target. But that wasn't all. What? With a high-pitched metallic sound, Reen's beloved Tachi was sundered cleanly in two. Princess! Kurogane was also taken aback by this new arrival. I heard what was happening from both our scouts. You could have invited me to join the fun instead of keeping it all to yourself. The words she chided Kurogane's indicated dissatisfaction. The music of her tone betrayed her excitement. Rin made up to see who this mysterious figure was. She kinda looks like the Grand Master, and the sight of her alone took his breath away. She was young, wearing a fortified suit that looked to be a marriage of classical and modern Eastern designs, with long silver hair that almost appeared to glow in the pale moonlight. Her age was likely close to Rin's, perhaps a little younger, with well-defined features that still held traces of adolescence, pairing strikingly in contrast to the empty void behind her eyes. There was an air of a young noblewoman who had been sheltered from her impurities all her life, and the stench of a baleful warrior who had bathed in blood of countless lives. How she was both and neither at once, Rin could not understand, but it was this very quality that made her all the more captivating and dangerous. In the woman's left hand was a large black engraved blade that threatened to freeze him for daring a glance at it. There was no doubt it was Rin's Tachi. It was no doubt it was what had halved Rin's Tachi moments ago. What did? Rin fumbled for the words as he clutched the useless handle tightly in his hand. The fair-haired woman only smiled as she looked down upon it. Your weapon was very fine, but it was never any match for my friend, I'm afraid. She spun the black blade in her hand gently before holding it up towards the night sky to seemingly display it with pride. It wasn't hard to see why she wouldn't boast about possessing such a weapon. He'd seen many a blade of historical significance, but instinct told him that hers was better than any one of those. The blunt side featured an intricate design of deep grey. While he could not discern its meaning there and then, he knew it was nothing less than a work of art. There was an aura about it, one cold as ice. It seemed to reject its worldly surroundings, making it capable of cutting through anything it so desired. It came in company with the beautiful hilt of a deep red that contrasted its body without feeling out of place. This juxtaposition was, in sense, much a reflection of its wielder, with the two opposing natures being distinctive yet also as one. Rin thought as he observed, her blade was clearly something special, but that alone did not explain the strength behind her attack. He had never heard of the technique she used, but it was certainly connected to the Ailey skull in some way, and the skill she showed in executing it made her equal to a divine blade. He was so fixated at these thoughts rushed through his mind that he was only brought out by her sudden laughter. I didn't think I'd ever meet you here. I wonder if our old master is behind guiding us to the same place, or if it's just a happy coincidence. Wait. The manner in which she spoke about her familiarity with Rin gave him a theory. The technique you used was really something. Consider me intrigued. It's put you on a league above, more interesting than our senior practitioners. So he was right. Are you? Before he could hear what he already knew, she turned away, refusing to let him finish the question. He isn't here, so why don't you go run on back to your family? Go and make the most of your vacation. Just don't let your skill with a blade slip. The world will need it again one day. She spoke with a certain satisfaction that pointed down the other half of his broken blade. Then she leaped high, seemingly disappearing on the other side of the moon. Rin could only stare, dumbfounded, as she vanished. He couldn't even speak. Kurogane had left with her. The Ikaruga, the Black God One Blade School, and our senior practitioners. Rin had been unable to fulfill his objective. Not just that, he had left with countless new questions about the people he encountered and the mountain itself. He felt there was meaning behind being guided to this specific place, but how important it was or what it entailed, he did not know. And yet, the person responsible for discerning that won't be me. Looking down at his broken Tachi, he was struck anew with how massive the world truly was. and he realized that now that his master was confirmed to be elsewhere, the purpose of his visit to Longley was nothing more than to enjoy a wonderful, ordinary vacation with his family. This meeting here was but a peculiar coincidence, for now at least. When I get back, I need to reforge my Tachi, and myself. Something had stirred in this region, all across Calvert, but there was nothing he could do about that as he was. All he could focus on was training and bettering himself, so he could one day play a part against the next threat that loomed over the distant horizon. New resolve running in his soul, he made his way through the now still mountain trail, back to where his loving family awaited. The end. Okay. I'm going to do the next one next time, I think. But that's another Hot Strings Paradise. I will see you guys for an unconventional student next time. How very interesting. So that's a separate, a dark side of the One Blade School, maybe? And seemingly we got introduced to a character there who is of Divine Blade skill and seemingly taught by Kafai. Who fucking knows? I don't. I try and avoid spoilers where I can. Sometimes they slip through. But if you enjoyed this, peace and love. I'll see you guys next time.